All right. So I know you were a youth pastor. How does that affect what you do now? How does your faith focus? How does your faith apply to how you run your independent brokerage?
Well, when I was a college pastor, what we were really focused on was helping folks who were in that transition from high school to adulthood stay connected to a faith community, because they found through most of the research through Barna and others that pivotal time is really when young adults are saying, hey, I went to church because my family made me, but now I don't have to. So I'm going to kind of, do what I want to do.
Yeah, distance themselves from church.
Exactly.
I don't have to get up early enough to go to church anymore. So why go?
Yep. And what we had to do to make that effective was really build communities. And what we found in the financial industry is that as folks are transitioning into this industry from all different types of careers, most of the folks, as you know, that we work with are all second career professionals. None of us come from a financial background.
Yeah.
So being able to build a community of like-minded people where they can grow, they can learn, they can thrive, and they can crush it, that was I think the major skill set that we used.
And so how does your faith affect this industry? How do you feel like personally your faith affects the life insurance industry or the financial brokerage industry?
I think in a couple ways, regardless of whether somebody's in finance or whether they're in medicine or construction or whatever background they're in, I think faith plays an incredible role in if you integrate it. A lot of times folks will ask me stuff like, how do you have a great work-life, faith-family balance? And I don't believe in balance. I don't subscribe to balance. I think you can have an integrated life. But I think if you're doing a lot and you're always leaning into more, you're going to have to juggle. And so faith, to me, instead of it being a piece of a puzzle, you put it at the center.
Yeah.
And if you kind of keep God at the center with his values, his perspective, his strategies, the strategies he gives to live life, the strategies he gives for successful relationships, the strategies he gives for business, I find that you're going to be able to keep everything kind of working together in its system.
And so building off of that, what would you say from the Bible is your personal favorite thing for keeping and building relationships with Christians and business?
I don't know if I have a favorite, but I think one of the ones that I've found to be really effective is the Apostle Paul brings up the fruits of the Spirit, right? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness. And he walks through these. And a lot of times when I learned them growing up, I don't know about you, but when I heard these growing up, there was always a definition that was given for those words of what that would look like as an adolescent or as a young adult or whatever in relation to my parents or my boss or a superior. And for me, that's kind of how I got exposed to the fruit of the Spirit. So as you're growing up, you always view it within the hierarchy of someone who's maybe power-wise above you. But I think they're incredibly powerful when you look at them in context of people that you're working along with, or people maybe even in a management or a leadership perspective that you have a responsibility to serve. And so I think if going back to the fruits of the Spirit, if someone kind of re-dives in there and really re-examines what do those words actually mean?
Especially in the original context that they were written in and not the modern context we have for these words today.
Yeah. If you go into like the original Greek and you look at love, agape, right? Everyone's like, oh, it's unconditional love. That's what Jesus had for us. Yeah, it is. But if you look at the real root of it, the real root of that would drive one to believe in a virtue called courage, because it's going to take a massive amount of courage to love people well.
Yeah.
But we don't often talk about courage in a relationship context. So the thing that we did in our brokerage is we took those 9 fruits of the Spirit and we went back to the original Greek and we said, hey, what are the real virtues needed to drive these, and creating a culture around those.
I love that. And so I know, so you were raised Christian?
I was. Yeah.
And so how do you feel? And I know you grew up in Rancho Cucamonga, right?
So we grew up in Southern California. When I graduated college, my wife and I, our first apartment was in Rancho Cucamonga. Yeah. Have you seen Next Friday?
I haven't, but it's on my list of things to watch.
I haven't watched it either. But everybody always says Rancho Cucamonga is mentioned, so it's a connection point. Yeah.
How do you feel living in Rancho Cucamonga when you were fresh out of college as a youth pastor, working with your nonprofit? How do you feel that affected your personal growth and your personal walk with Christ?
When I was working at the nonprofit, I worked at a nonprofit doing media. There was some fundraising. I worked as a college pastor, and I loved helping people. It was an easy industry to be in because you're serving people, you're doing good. The challenge was living in LA, I wasn't making a lot of money. And so I had to find a career where I could both have a massive impact, but also make a bigger income. And for a lot of the folks I think you and I have talked about that are in our demographic, right? We're young, we're hungry, we're after it, we want more out of life. I find the 2 biggest things that young folks are looking for today is they're looking for a place where they can have significance, contribution, meaning I'll bundle all that into impact, but you still got to pay bills.
Exactly.
And I don't know about you, but there's a lot of causes that matter to different people, right? My wife and I, we care a lot about helping contribute towards ending human trafficking or rescuing kids out of that, helping end the clean water crisis in the world. What are causes that matter for you?
Honestly, it's financial literacy, because this new generation is extremely, they think they're financially literate when they're really not. Because it's like the overabundance of information out there on financial literacy. It's an overwhelming amount of information, and you'll see one or two things. There's a contradicting opinion on every single side of the financial literacy. IULs are good, IULs are bad. Annuities are good, annuities are bad. And so there's just so much.
Credit cards are good, credit is bad, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's just so much stuff out there that I want to help bring clarity to that by interviewing people who are actually in the industry.
Yeah, makes sense.
With this, how much have you made with your brokerage? And since, how much did you make in the first year?
First year, we made nothing. Made $0 the first 13 months being in business.
So, dude, you made $0 your first year. How did y'all live doing that?
So it was tough. And like I said, working in the nonprofit space, we were probably only making 50 grand a year at the job. So I was in the business part-time, probably like a lot of people who do Uber, Lyft, or real estate, or do something on the side. And yeah, it was crazy rough. We lived about 3 hours away from the office.
Oof.
So in LA, we're driving 3 hours one way just to go to training. But when you have a dream and when you have faith that you can make it work, like you said, I knew I didn't want to have a boss forever. I know I wanted to be my own boss, and I just had to get better.
It's when dream, faith, and passion all intersect.
Yeah.
That it's really like something clicks, and it's just like, I need to do this.
Yeah.
Well, how much did you make the second year?
Gosh, nothing. $13,000, $15,000. It was like absolutely part-time income.
And so what year did you really like explode in the industry?
So I made a decision to get serious about the business and stop treating it like a hobby, probably around year 3. And when we did that, we made $50,000 doing it 15, 20 hours a week. And that really replaced my job's full-time income.
Yeah.
And so we went full-time. We made 6 figures in 6 months.
Crazy.
And then from there, I mean, if you run a restaurant and it's successful, all you want to do is open up another one.
Exactly.
And just keep duplicating. So we kept opening up financial planning offices and insurance offices around the country. And at this point, we've helped around 2,000 people get their license.
That's awesome.
Our number one gal, she just turned 28. She made $1 million last year.
That's crazy. That is insane.
Yeah.
Because I'm almost 28. And so thinking that a 28-year-old making $1 million a year, that's insane.
Yeah.
Especially in today's economy, especially because it's all $1 million cash flow. It's not $1 million of revenue.
Right. Take home.
How hard do you feel it is to get started in this industry with doing what we do?
Getting started is not the challenge for anybody. If somebody wants to get into real estate, they're going to have to study and invest some money and pass a test and make some connections. If they want to go become a doctor to get started, they're going to have to pay a few $100,000 in student loans, go to school for 8 to 12 years. So getting started, I think, for a lot of people is going to be way easier in this industry than a lot of other industries. The challenge is, do you have what it takes emotionally to keep going? And dating, marriage is the same way, right? My wife and I, we've been married for 15 years now. Getting started, you got the fireworks, you have the chemistry. Yep. You're married, so you know.
We're going on year 5.
That's what's up. So in the beginning, there's the excitement. It's new. Once you have a fight, once you have a disagreement, then it's like, do I have the emotional willpower? Do I have the discipline to say, I'm committed?
That's when your viewpoint on love changes, and it's love moves from an emotion to a choice. It's
absolutely.
Like, am I going to choose to love this person despite this fight or in spite of this fight?
Yeah.
Am I going to choose to love them for their flaws?
Yeah.
Not, are their flaws going to make me not love them?
And not even their flaws, I find too. Am I going to choose to love them enough for me to change me?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times in business, what I find is people come in, there's the initial excitement. I'm going to be successful, make a lot of money. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to travel the world. And once that wears off, do they have the emotional fortitude to keep going with, I'm going to stay disciplined, I'm going to stay in the gym, I'm going to wake up like Kobe, I'm going to go again. And do I have the willingness to change me to grow and personally develop? And some people just refuse to grow. But the ones who do choose to grow, oh my God, sky's the limit.
What does it take to get started with Or with what we do
in the industry.
Yeah.
You got to get a license. So if you have any felonies, misdemeanors, bankruptcies, tax liens, it's going to slow down your licensing process because we deal with people's sensitive information, documents, financials, things like that. You got to be willing to study for a test. You got to be willing to take 3 to 14 days out of your life and get a C or better on a multiple choice test. And you got to be willing to invest the time and the resources to get trained. If you want to do any career, any field, someone who's ahead of you, if they train you, you'll end up being successful faster. So
exactly,
you got to have a little bit of skin in the game.
How did you find this industry? How did this industry find you?
So what's crazy is one of my spiritual mentors, she ran the prayer team at church. She was a super famous actress in Hollywood, was there for 30 years. If I said the stuff she's been on, you'd been like, everybody's heard of that stuff. She invited me over her house. I thought it was a prayer meeting. And one of her colleagues who was in this industry was there, and everyone's kind of just chit-chatting, hanging out, talking, having food, breaking bread. And I struck up a conversation and found out what this industry was, the financial industry, what the licensing took, and that they were expanding their office. And I was at a point in my life where even though I didn't have a whole lot of self-confidence, I didn't have any experience, I knew I had to do something more than what I was doing. So I asked, hey, would you give me a shot? Could I come to the office? Could I, have an interview?
Yeah.
And they gave me a shot. They gave me an interview. I took it. I got a license and decided I had to make it work.
Why did you continue? I know you mentioned your faith being the push for it, but even though with that, I know it was, what do you feel like the hardest point was continuing with it in that first year?
Yeah. The first part of what you asked was how did my faith get involved in it? What's crazy is when I saw the financial industry on the insurance side of the fence, because most people see the financial industry on the stock market side of the fence.
Exactly.
Or the crypto side of the fence. And, a lot of social media people, all this kind of stuff, they can make it look really sexy. Like, I'm a day trader, I'm in crypto, I'm in stock market. Oh, insurance, that's boring. That's for old people. So people have their stereotypes, no problem. But when you really get to the root of what's going on with some of these financial instruments, a very different reality emerges. And one of the things I found incredibly fascinating about the insurance side of the fence of the financial industry was that there are financial instruments or financial products that allow people to not just compound and grow wealth, but to preserve it and control it. And one of the main things that wealthy folks care about is not just, is my money growing, but we care about, hey, is it protected from Uncle Sam? How do I get him out of my pocket? And number two, do I have a sense of control? Because if you have to give up control and you have to sacrifice your money at the altar of Uncle Sam, it's going to be very, very difficult to build and compound wealth that way.
And not even that, but even with someone else managing your money, I think over in a 10-year trend, the S&P outperformed active fund managers by a decent amount.
Warren Buffett talks all the time about it's hard to outplay the S&P. But in insurance, one of the things that was interesting was you look at like all these churches, right? So I was involved in a church, and maybe some of the folks watching this go to church. I was pretty consistent contributing to tithes. I believe in I believe in tithing as a spiritual practice, as a spiritual discipline. But what I noticed was a lot of the churches from a business perspective would have good-hearted people running the organization with very little business experience or business savvy. That's not a condemnation of them. It's just an observation of what I saw. And when I looked at some of these financial products on the insurance side of the fence, I realized that major organizations, universities, they all have endowments. They have these pools of money that will grow and compound over time. They get favorable tax treatment. And eventually the organization can operate based off of interest from these endowments without ever messing with the principal. And very early on in my career, this dream got stuck in my heart. Oh my gosh, what if we could help the church that's actually advancing the kingdom, the church that's being the ecclesia in the earth, that's advancing that campaign for Christ? What if we could help them build an actual form of their own endowment where one generation from now, the salaries of the pastor, the people on staff, the lights, the bills, all stuff, what if that stuff was operationally covered and all of the tithes and offerings and what people were giving was 100% going to ministry? So I got captivated with this idea of how to bring some of these different strategies into the church. And I said, I'm not letting go.
What do you feel like your biggest success has been with that, with bringing those opportunities to the churches?
I think the biggest success hasn't even been on an institutional level yet. I think it's been on a relational level. Honestly, to see people who buy into this idea of marketplace ministry. Because it used to be that if someone in the church saw you as talented or anointed or gifted, they immediately attempted to pull you from whatever field you were in and pull you into the church. Oh, you should be a pastor. You should be a teacher. You should work in the church. Go to seminary. And I think the greatest thing that we're seeing is people are realizing the fivefold offices of ministry that Paul talks about in Ephesians, those offices, those domains of authority, they exist in every single sector of the marketplace, in every single industry, in every single business. And so to see people buy into, oh my gosh,
I'm not just a Christian at church. I'm a Christian in business as well. Yes. I'm a Christian at my workplace. I'm a Christian at my 9 to 5. I'm a Christian playing pickleball or whatever.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So for people who don't read the Bible or may not know, what are those 5 pillars?
So he talks about in Ephesians them being apostles, prophets, pastors, evangelists, and teachers. And in the original language, they have maybe a different meaning than you'd just think of if you're watching this without context, but I won't go into that. Suffice to say, the role of all of those 5 different spaces is to prepare and equip God's people for service. It's not necessarily an authoritarian place of telling people what to do. It's an equipping place of empowering people. And you see in marketplace ministry, in business, so often, if I want an organization to be successful, I've got to serve it. I've got to lead it through a very different way than just managing it top down.
Like the number one businesses in America and the world started with servant leadership, like Sam Walton with Walmart. Sam Walton gave his everything for Walmart. When Sam Walton was still alive, Walmart was one of the best companies you could work for and nobody knew about it. Like they had pensions, they had great benefits. And then the minute he died and that servant leadership went away, Walmart started slowly becoming less of a career job and more of a starter job. It's really amazing to see the impact servant leadership and faith-based servant leadership has on even like major Fortune 500 businesses. What would you say is your personal pillar out of those?
I don't think I'm not going to tell anybody. I'm undercover on that one. I'm totally undercover on that one. But what I will say is this, I see my number one role and responsibility in working with people in this case, a business context, is to help someone identify their gifting, help them identify what would be the trap door that would sabotage their gifting, and then empower them to be able to develop that where they can be successful in business. Because I firmly believe if you have someone with good character and you teach them good business principles and they make a lot of money, they'll do good things with it. I think money is a magnifying glass in general. It'll make somebody more of what they are. I don't subscribe to this, money is evil, money isn't everything, money is the root of all evil. I don't subscribe to that.
Money is a thing. Money can't be good, bad.
It's just a tool.
Yep.
Yeah.
What's your number one tip for success for someone who wants to get into this with us?
I would say from a faith-based perspective that if someone has a vision of saying, man, I really want to have an impact in the world. I want to change things. Whether it's clean water, whether it's human trafficking, whether it's writing books, whether it's starting nonprofits, whether it's running multiple businesses, they want to create wealth to be able to have a kingdom impact. They've got to be willing to go through the process of development. And so often I find specifically believers in business, they feel like, God's given them a promise and that they're going to be successful or they're going to make it. And they're hoping that also is a magic carpet ride to the end, as opposed to a golden ticket to the process. But in Scripture, God never promotes people that he hasn't put through process.
Exactly.
And so getting into the industry, I'd say, yeah, you can make a lot of money. Yeah, you can become an incredible person, but you've got to be willing to grow, to change, to develop, and to evolve.
And so that leads me into the main question here is, can someone be rich and be Christian?
I would say this, and it's going to piss a lot of people off. I think if you're Christian, you almost have a duty and a responsibility to steward wealth. And I think there's a difference between being rich, getting rich, staying rich, and stewarding wealth. The example is this. Everyone's seen Batman, I hope.
Exactly.
You have Bruce Wayne and you have Alfred. And I think not everybody, but just follow me on this. Yeah. We see that we're like, man, I want to be Bruce Wayne, right? I want to be a billionaire. I want to have all the money. I want to have all the toys, the big mansion. I want to be a superhero. There's something about that whole metaphor that calls to the space in us where people want to be more, have more, give more, and be powerful and give back, right? Someone who gets overlooked a ton is Alfred. But Batman couldn't be Batman and Bruce Wayne couldn't be Bruce Wayne without Alfred. I thought that my calling in business was, oh my gosh, God's going to make me a Bruce Wayne for the kingdom. What I've discovered along my journey is that God's really calling me to be an Alfred. So you may have an incredible house, private jets, unimaginable wealth at your disposal. But even when you do, you're still called to be a steward of it, that it's not mine. It belongs to my Father, belongs to the kingdom. And so I think moving into a stewardship mentality as opposed to accumulation mentality can also help move people from a get rich mentality to a build and steward wealth mentality.
What was your kind of like mental switch that you had going from being that Bruce Wayne to being Alfred? What was that trigger?
So we were rocking and rolling in business, and I was sitting down at the end of the year. I always do a business plan, and I always ask Holy Spirit, I'm like, hey, Holy Spirit, this is your business, not mine. What do you want your business to do next year? How do you want this thing to grow? And I need some strategies. How do you want to grow it? Right. So I don't see myself as the CEO. I see myself as on the board, but I'm supposed to execute. Right. And I remember he gave me a really clear directive that was insanely scary. And for us, my wife and I, it had to do with how we were going to increase what we were giving and contributing. And there was a number and percentage and stuff like that. And so we just said, okay, we sat down, prayed, and said, Lord, are you really saying this? And we tested it and felt like it really was him. And so the key point here is we leaned into, for us, what was a scary level of generosity. And when we leaned into a new level of generosity, it unlocked something in our hearts of moving towards stewardship versus ownership. And I would tell anybody who wants to lean into a space of like, man, how do I move towards stewardship versus just accumulation, right? Lean into generosity and it'll unlock something.
I know you've heard the phrase, it's better to give than to receive in the Bible. So, and I've done a little bit of looking into the original meaning of it, but well, I know you know the original meaning of it as well. So
yeah, if you look at the original Greek of this piece, there really are positional words. The real phrase is, it's better to be in a position to be able to give than being stuck in a position to have to receive. And for sure, there's folks who will probably watch this and they're like, Andrew, I'm on my last dollar. Andrew, I'm on government assistance. Andrew, my spouse left me. Andrew, you don't know my situation. What do you mean? Like, am I bad? Am I ungodly because I'm in a position where I need help, need charity? No, I'm not saying that. But if you look at the words of Jesus, he certainly does not condemn being wealthy. He looks at the heart posture people have, whether they have or whether they don't have.
Reminds me of the parable of the tithing parable, where it's the two Pharisees who are over there and they're tithing a bunch of money. And then the poor woman comes up and tithes her last coin. And Jesus says, truly, she is more wealthy than them. She is making that effort to, even though she is broke, even though she doesn't have anything, she's still making that effort to give to God, give back to God what is God's.
Yeah.
And a much more difficult position to give from.
I think the real heart of the issue for me is if someone's in a spot where they're like, man, I don't have a lot. Well, God specifically said, I've given you the power and ability to go create wealth to advance my covenant in the earth. And so everyone has the ability to create wealth. We have limiting beliefs. We have limiting mindsets. We have things we have to outgrow. But I remember when I was really frustrated with my income and I felt like it wasn't fair and, oh my gosh, I'm worth more and my job should pay me more. And I'll never forget what my mentors said. They said, why do you keep whining and being a victim about the fact that your job underpays you if you choose to stay there?
That is powerful.
No one's chaining you to your desk. Every Monday, Wednesday, you choose to show up to that job. So choose to go somewhere else. And it woke me up of like, you're right, I am being a victim. So I have compassion for people who are in a rough situation and they want more. It's difficult for me to see someone who's in a rough financial situation and they're voluntarily choosing not to make moves to grow.
Exactly. Out of it. What would you say your number one tip of advice is? So, like your number one advice for me on growing in this business as a newcomer to this business, someone who wants to grow, who wants to help, who wants to explode, I guess?
I would say for anybody who wants to do something big in business, really have a vision of what the impact is you want to cause, not what the income is you want to make. There's nothing wrong with having targets and goals and financials and all that. It's good to have the business plan, but have a real clear outcome of the impact. So you look at Jesus. This one's really going to mess people up. So when Jesus died, it says that all the Roman soldiers were around and they were rolling dice, playing poker so they could figure out who gets to keep his clothes. And it was notable enough that the author of the gospel said his clothes were worth 3 years' wages. So the average income in America today, let's say it's $60,000. So if Jesus were alive today, he's rolling around in clothes that cost $180,000.
Insane.
So we're like, oh my gosh, he's wearing a Louis Vuitton. Oh my gosh, that Gucci. It's so easy to get judgmental about people who are spending money. Jesus is rolling around doing his miracles in $180,000 worth of garments. And people know it. And he has no problem rolling up that way. And he'll sit with the leper, and he'll sit with the rich person, and he'll sit with the business owner, and he'll sit with the prostitute. We have issues on wealth. God has no issues on wealth. If God had an issue with wealth, then why did he promise he would give it if we were faithful? If God had an issue with wealth, then why did he give Solomon $1 trillion building project? If God had an issue with wealth, why would he say something like, hey, Malachi, if you bring the whole tithe and the whole offering into my house, test me in this. See if I won't open up the windows of blessing for you. There won't even be room enough to receive it. God promises, as his people are coming out, I'm going to give you houses you didn't build, vineyards you didn't plant, wells you didn't dig. Those are all wealth creation vehicles in their agrarian culture of the time.
Yeah.
So God doesn't have an issue with money or wealth. We do. We have all kinds of limiting blueprints and beliefs about it. So for somebody who wants to do something really big in business, I say, one, have a very clear impact about the benefit you want to cause for other people. Number two, identify your money blueprint. What's the money blueprint you got from family, church, friends, professors, teachers? What's your money blueprint? And then figure out, man, where do I have limiting beliefs about money, and how do I rework a new money blueprint? If someone will do those two things, they'll be very clear on the impact they want to cause and how they want to make other people's lives better by creating wealth. And if they'll examine their own money blueprint, man, it's going to be an incredible story.
Hey, man, that was awesome. Those are some amazing gems you just dropped. Thank you for coming on here. It's been amazing. It's been incredible to hear your story and all the gems you've dropped along the way.
Great being with you.